Great pleasure that I'm moderating this panel today. We have extraordinary speakers, and I can tell you from having spoken to them already, you will find them very, very informative. We have 4 panelists. First, we have Ben Case. He's the Executive Director of Innovation in Sustainability at the Toronto Transit Commission. He's held a number of roles at TTC over his 20-year office. His experience over that time is going to benefit his current role, which looks forward into innovative solutions for Toronto, and that includes their electrification plans. We also have Luc Lamontagne. He's the Director General, Information Technologies and Innovation at Société de Transport de Montréal. Luc's role combines information technology and operational technology, and he is behind the electrification program of the STM bus fleet. We also have James McDonald. He's the Director of Transit at Saskatoon Transit, and James is at the heart of the city of Saskatoon's electric bus fleet deployment and feasibility studies around electrifying their fleet. Last but not least, we have Daniel Villeneuve, Program Manager for Capital Projects and Engineering at OC Transpo, and Dan boasts 15 years experience of operational and program management, and he ensures the successful completion of programs, which includes electric bus deployment within their existing operations. A lot more detail of these great individuals are available on the events webpage, so feel free to go look at their extensive background. The panel today, each of the panelists will take a little bit of time for their own individual presentations. We'll then move forward for my questions a little bit. And then, as Namra said, I'll open the floor to your questions, and I really look forward to receiving them. So let's start with the individual presentations. We'll go with Bem, Luc, James, and Daniel. So Bem.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Christos, for the introduction. TTC's story started back in 2017. The City of Toronto had adopted the Transform TO Climate Action Plan, which targeted at that time to reach net zero by 2050 or sooner. It's been made more aggressive now to target 2040. The TTC board approved the last diesel bus that we would ever receive. Can you hear me? I'm chipping in and out on my end.
I lost you for a bit, Ben, but I don't know if it was me. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can? Okay, great. I'm not sure, did you, I'll start again, I guess. I'll try to go quickly.
Sure.
Our story starts in 2017.
We can hear you, Ben.
Oh, you can, okay.
Yeah. No, we cannot. Perhaps we can go to the second one if you want to take a quick logistic check. Luc, you want to take over?
Yes, I can. So I hope I'm going to have a better chance than Ben for that. So hi, everyone. First of all, a quick introduction of STM, Société Transport of Montreal, is the third organization in North America with a ridership around 1.3 million a trip and an average weekday before the pandemic. We're the third after Toronto and New York. We deliver the service with a supported around 10,000 employees. For us, electrification is already part of our DNA. Actually, 82% of our ride is delivered with electricity, mainly supported obviously by our 100% electric subway. Today, our hybrid and electric buses represent close to 35 or 34 of our fleets. Moving electric is an engagement for us. It's also an engagement for our government for this transitions. The province of Quebec program for green economy, what we call here the PEV, set an objective of 55% of urban fleet to be converted by 2030, which is, I will talk later of that, but it's an aggressive objective. Also, government will finance only electric buses by 2025, but already they put a lot of pressure to accelerate and have constraint to acquire hybrid buses from 2023. Considering the 100% of electric buses, we forecast reducing from 89% portion of our consumption of fuel, which is part of the economical benefits to finance the cost of the electric operational cost. We started seriously to experiment electric buses since 2017, what I heard from them as well, with our city mobility project that we did with Volvo Novibus. We have 7 fast charging electric buses, enough to provide a fully electrification service online on one of our line, which is the famous 36 Monks that we still operate today. The learning of that's very interesting model with the fast charging, but a very complex to deploy in terms of infrastructure, knowing that every stations need to have their own electric infrastructure on the ground, and obviously the lack of flexibility in the network. In 2019, we received our first depot charge buses from New Flyers. Now we have close to 40 electric buses actually from 4 different manufacturers. Many learnings we get from now. I will tell you the top 5 that we consider. The first one is the evolution of industry standard in terms of standard of the facilities. An example, the fire and preventions that host a fleet of electric buses. The standards is not well designed, and we open the road pretty much for that. The second one is the simulation of transit network. That gives us a better understanding of the operation costs based on the 2 charging model. As I said before, we had the fast charging. We are now testing also the depot charging. For us, it's really clear that we're moving forward with the depot charging. The third learnings that we got is the understanding of our internal process for maintenance, especially in terms of production and safety in our facilities. The fourth is the capacity to diagnostic problem and commissioning process for buses and chargers. And the last one is the understanding of the impact on the requirement on the how we adapt our existing facilities to adapt to electric buses. At the same time, we operate that facilities, which is a big challenge for us. So really, in terms of learnings, it's a people, process, and technologies learnings. Electrification is going to, for us, is really a question of agility and innovations. Even if we experiment and we test different technologies, we know that we open the roads and nobody now can pretend to know exactly the end state of a fully electric network. So we still have a couple of years of ambiguity and uncertainty. What will be the life cycle of battery? How we're going to adapt to that? So all those questions need to be answered over years. So that's we need to put in place processes and mechanisms to innovate with our partners. Now we are moving from experiments modes to a transformations mode. And it's important for us. You are just launching the transformation program. Over the last years, we're more in experimentation modes. And for us, it's really a transformation program, not necessarily just a project. Obviously, in that transformation, they have many projects. Actually, we have one construction project for a brand new garage that is designed especially for electric buses. But we also prepare the construction for our other 6 other facilities to adapt. And at the same time, we're going to still continue to operate them. We have also 3 in that transformation program, 3 technological projects. The telemetry, which is gather the vehicle information, the smart yard management to ensure the bus location optimization. And we also have a major update of our Astus software version to make sure they manage a new constraint related to electric buses. But on top of that, we have also foundations. We identified 10 work streams like HR transformation, commissioning, acquisition, communication, and foundings. We have 10 work streams like that is foundation for that transformations. In terms of our deployment, our plan is to receive 45 buses by 2025. As I said, we already have 40 actually, but the next wave will be in 2025 for around 45 for first wave. And after that, we expect having a beat of 140 per year in terms of ingestion to replace the entire fleet. The beat of 140 will manage a decommissioning of our diesel buses after the 16 years without a too fast replacement to make sure we ingest the new technologies and make sure we are able to spread the risk over the new models of electric buses. Our main challenges, four quickly. First, identify charger and monitoring solution. For us, this is one of our, it's identified in our critical path. We know that the solution right now, it's not mature as we expect. So it's one of our main challenges. The second one is to find out a solution for our 60-foot articulated bus. We have articulated bus right now that will be end of life by 2026. And we need a solution to replace them. Knowing that where we are in the market right now and knowing that the call of tender criteria with the content market is still a challenge. The third one is the speed to ramp up the team and hire talent in our actual, and you all know the actual war of talents, especially with engineer and IT specialists. And the fourth is to finalize the funding. For us, it's a 5 billion transformations, and it's a main challenge for us to make sure we have access to that fund. To conclude, and I will finish with that, capitalize on our learnings, but keep innovation and experimenting process in place for the next years. And we strongly believe that it's a great opportunity for transit agency to reinvent their business services. So that's it.
Thank you, Luc. Very interesting. Things are quickly changing at the STM, obviously, from your presentation. Bem, do you want to give it a try?
Can you hear me now?
Can, loud and clear.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Luc's story mirrors ours very much. And in terms of the challenges ahead, I'm going to try to focus a little bit on some of the differences as I go through my notes here so that I don't end up just repeating myself. But so as I was saying, in 2017, the City of Toronto adopted the Transform TO Climate Action Plan, which set a target for net zero by 2050 or sooner. That's since been revised just recently, or it's in the process of being revised to target 2040. The TTC board adopted the staff's plan to transition the bus fleet over to zero emissions by 2040. In 2018, June of 2018, we received the last diesel bus that we'll ever receive. And we started receiving hybrid electric buses at that point. The hybrid electric bus for us is a transition technology. It has an electric drivetrain, it's got a traction motor, it's got powered by batteries, it's got an onboard generator, of course, because those batteries are not sufficient to make the entire run. But this transition technology has no operational constraints in terms of range, but allows the opportunity for coach technicians to gain experience in maintaining what is essentially an electric bus with a diesel engine, allows our operators to gain experience with operating a bus with regenerative braking and such. And by the way, you know, it achieves, it's measured to be consuming 47% less fuel, and it's saving us about that much in fuel costs as well. So close to 50% of the GHG reduction that we need. And in the meantime, it's a cost neutral undertaking because the fuel savings has paid for the incremental cost of the bus. So it's a great transition technology for us. Working with Toronto Hydro, our local utility, in the years since 2017 approval, the first bus went into service in the middle of 2019, first e-bus, all electric, battery electric bus. And then over the next almost year, we received 60 buses, and now we have 60 long-range battery electric buses in our fleet, which is the largest fleet in North America at this time. I like to keep on saying that because it's only for so long I can keep on saying that until someone surpasses us. But we are working hard to obviously stay ahead there, and there's a friendly competition perhaps across the North America for this title. So we bought, like Luc again, we bought multiple buses from multiple manufacturers. In fact, at that time, there were 3 manufacturers producing long-range battery electric buses, New Flyer, Proterra, and BYD. So we bought buses from each of those, and we undertook a head-to-head evaluation of all 3 with defined criteria for bus evaluation, for charging, obviously, but also for vendor management. And we reported that back to our board just earlier this year. And the conclusion of that and I'll get to some more details here, but the conclusion of that exercise was that in the end, only 2% of the failures we were seeing were related to the electric propulsion system. Everything else was related to the bus itself. So this typical stuff, doors, HVAC, suspension, etc. And although the availability of the fleet and the reliability of the fleet was lower than the hybrid electric bus, which we have now set as our standard, as our high watermark. It's a hybrid bus supplied by Nova Bus. They're all on the upward trend. And one of those manufacturers, that happened to have been New Flyer, had exceeded by that time the minimum reliability requirements. Now all three have exceeded that minimum reliability requirement. And so they're still not up where they need to be. And there's some lessons learned, and I'll share with those. And in the question that we were asked to prepare here, what we need from suppliers, there's a correlation here. COVID, we're asked to talk about the COVID impact. COVID impact, it did have some impacts, certainly on supply chain, particularly initially with the lockdowns, and with technical support coming from the international suppliers in particular, but also local ones at some point. We were all able to overcome this in time, and we've been moved on. So there's no long-term effect on the e-bus program itself. Of course, we could talk about ridership projections and all of that, but for the e-bus program itself, there's no long-term impact. Lessons learned. And these are, some technical bits that I've captured. There's some high-level ones that I share with Luke completely. On the technical bits, the highest drive chain efficiency is not necessarily our primary goal. What we need is actually, from a transit planning perspective, is consistent performance of energy consumption through all seasons, and as consistent as possible between drivers, between operators, and across topology across the city. That's what we need, actually. So we would actually pay more for electricity if we could get some consistency. And that's something that we didn't really understand until we put them in service and started using them. For winter performance specifically, this largely means optimizing heating, but it also means optimizing acceleration profiles, regenerative braking as well. We want to maximize regenerative braking, but at the same time, in winter months, obviously we can't do that, and without the risk of entering a slip condition. Again, the biggest issues though are not the fact that it's an electric bus. These are all things that have required some optimization, and we're making improvements there. So what we need from the suppliers is to concentrate on the supply chain, and the supply chain technical support, frontline support. What we need is for them, while they're building reliability of the various systems, particularly, frankly, the OEMs that don't have established supply chains in Canada, they need to establish them, and they need to be robust. They need to be at the level that they know is required to support a transit system, and they're not quite there yet. They're working on it for sure, and they're making improvements, but they're not quite there yet. So what's next? So we have partnered with Toronto Hydro for the supply of the required electricity to our properties, of course. We also entered into a framework for agreement between Toronto Hydro for that supply, but also with OPG, Ontario Power Generation, for the design, build, co-investment, ownership, operate, and maintenance. So everything for all electrification infrastructure that's required on our sites. We are in the midst of a procurement of 300 more hybrid electric buses. The last hybrid will come in 2023. And in 2023, we will begin receiving deliveries of 300 more battery electric buses that will come in between 2023 and Q1 of 2025. From that point forward, we need 170 to 200 buses annually. And of course, all the infrastructure in step behind it.
Thank you, Bem. What I pulled from that is you need testing, and for those who have not started testing, we encourage testing. There's different options in the market. I will not boost ours, but Benoit will speak about Nova Bus later. He's my colleague. But different applications will come in play in what you said. So completely agree with you there. So thank you. We'll move on to our next guest, James.
Good morning. From the city of Saskatoon, which I have a total fleet of about 140 buses. So BEM, if any of the ones that are being shipped to you could get stuffed off the train somewhere near Saskatoon, I'd really appreciate it. It would really help me out. First off, I want to actually thank Toronto and Edmonton and others that have already done first level studies of zero emission buses in service, because without those being out in the marketplace, we wouldn't be able to get to where we're supposed to go. I have a staff of 2 people with PNGs behind their name, one of which is my maintenance manager. The other one works in my planning organization. So I have absolutely no technical abilities to do any research and development. So we really do rely on our friends and colleagues from the bigger systems within our industry. And we absolutely enjoy it when you provide us with that information. So thank you in advance. One of the things that we're looking at is I have a garage that'll fit about 225 buses. My fleet is 140 strong, all of them diesel at this point. Some of them, the older generation of diesel hybrids, which are starting to come near end of life. Fortunately, I was just approved by my council last week for procurement of 2 electric battery buses in the next procurement cycle. We were fortunate enough to be able to get a lease of 1 electric battery bus. We had it for about a year. That just ended in September. And it was very valuable for us to understand how a battery bus would work in Saskatoon. It got our operators at least an understanding of what it's like to drive a bus that's got regenerative braking. It also allowed our mechanics to sort of understand, oh, that's the no touch area, and now I get it. So very, very instrumental. We also had a partnership for that with FCM. We thank them very much for assisting us with the funding for that year-long lease. But we also had an important partnership with a Saskatchewan Research Council. You know, it's the provincial version of the National Research Council. And they did a lot of testing, which actually proved some of the concepts. So from my perspective, I can't get rid of the diesel buses fast enough here. In particular, when it's -30 and I've got 25% of my fleet stuck in the garage because the particulate emissions filters can't get hot enough to burn everything off. So I get 25% of my fleet coming back to the garage under sort of emergency control. When we had our electric battery bus, there were no problems during -40. Absolutely no problems. I think if you've got a CNG bus, you'll find the exact same thing. Diesel, my fleet is crippled and I can't get out of them fast enough for that reason. And it's not about the manufacturers, it's all about the emission control systems. So that put in a box and put aside, my city also has a low emissions community plan that's been approved by our council, which is looking at us having a zero emission bus fleet by 2030. And you know, I have 140 buses. I've been approved to buy 2 this year. So that really doesn't lead me to being able to meet that target by 2030 if we're going at this rate. However, what we're doing, Saskatoon is a relatively flat city. And our projection right now is that we're going to go with depot charging for our buses until our build out for our bus rapid transit system has actually been completed to a certain level. Our power generator has basically done an investigation of our garage and found that I could probably get about 30 electric battery buses in my present facility, which was just opened in 2017, about 30 without any major modifications, which is hopefully 3 years after we start getting a whole bunch of additional funding, and we can take advantage of whatever funding is coming from the federal government with that 5,000 electric buses. So when we start receiving our fleet renewal strategy is for about 10 buses per year, although with the costs of the zero emission buses, that might be very, very restricted. So I've got time to sort of plan from depot charging buses to whether or not I go to en route charging using any of the pantographs at various different hard locations. So we've got a little bit more time than some of these the bigger properties to understand what that means. And I don't actually have to do a large scale retrofit in the near future. That's pretty much it from my small property.
Thank you, James. Very exciting times with Government of Canada releasing data that they want 5,000 new buses. And with any new technology, I agree with you. We have to learn from each other, and the innovators out there, the ones that are more advanced, if they can share information not to repeat the same challenges, well, don't want to put Luc and Bem and Daniel on the forefront, but I think it'll be helpful for everyone. Thank you for that. Last but not least, Daniel.
Hi, everyone. So from my end, I'll explain a bit where OC Transpo is at. And same as James, we were sort of holding off, not early adopters of electric bus technology. So we were following what TTC, Montreal, Edmonton were doing. But at one point that caught up to us, and we were forced to start moving with electric buses. So we actually started in 2019. I'm going to say a little aggressively. We got given the mandate to procure 4 electric buses, bring those into service in 2021. So we're there now. We've just onboarded the 4 first buses, and we've started our trials, and we'll be putting them in service in January. And at the same time, while one team, which I was leading on the procurement of the 4 buses, our planning department was aggressively moving forward on the future. What does the transition look like? Because our city of Ottawa has put an aggressive target to go zero emissions by 2030. Looking at that, what we looked at OC Transpo is, one, looking at our facilities, what the parking layout can be, looking at our replacement plan for our buses on a 15-year life cycle, working with Hydro Ottawa on availability of hydro capacity. And essentially, we've brought a report to our Board of Governors in 2020, indicating that we would transition as the bus get end of life. So our current plan is to transition to electric buses, all electric, by 2036. So quite aggressive in the next 5 years. 450 of our buses are being transitioned out because of end of life. So that's our current challenge that we're working towards. And the first 74 additional buses would come in late 2023. So that's what we're sort of our challenge we're up against. We early on at the City of Ottawa adopted that OC Transpo, we will take care of the bus business, and Hydro Ottawa will take care of everything related to electrical infrastructure. And we started that approach with the 4 pilot buses. So Hydro Ottawa is leading the design, procurement, installation, maintenance, energy management, everything you want to think about power or electricity. Hydro Ottawa is doing that. Obviously, the City of Ottawa is paying for it, but we do have in Ottawa, anyways, we have a good. The opportunity was given to us because the City of Ottawa owns Hydro Ottawa, so that's an advantage that we have. Made that decision easy and clear for us, and that is making, when you want to talk about lessons learned, that is one lesson that, it depends on the region, it depends on the province, it depends on your city, but if you can partner up with your utility company, definitely that's a benefit. That's their expertise. That's what they do day in, day out. And our side, buses is essentially our expertise. On the bus front, 4 buses have arrived, and now it's transitioning or training, playing with those buses and lessons learned over the next 12 months as we start the procurement of future buses.
Thank you, Daniel. Oh, sorry, yes. Also exciting times for OC Transpo, and yes, for those that can benefit from various partnerships within government entities, it adds definite added value on the transition to electrification. Very informative. Thank you, everyone. We have already received a few questions in the Q&A. Keep on coming them in. I will start with mine, and this one will be addressed to all of you because you all have various different experiences from your various provinces. and it goes as follows. We know that governments have recently announced availability of funds for electric bus deployments, including infrastructure. But we'd like to hear you concretely, though. If we were to achieve the targets that are set by the governments, what are the next steps and the stages that you need to take before you deploy buses in your fleet? Take us by the hand and describe them. We'll start with Luc.
Thank you for the question, Christos. First, we all know that announcing funds and getting funds is two different things. Now we have rules that we cannot start any expense since we have access to that funds. And it's still a challenge for us, but actually we are still in experimentation modes. So we have to do the transitions to the transformation modes. So, but the good thing, it's right now we put a governance with Quebec government, which is want to really moving forward with that. And the good news is our first funds is coming by December. So we're gonna have the first step of that. And for us, the next step will be to make sure we have people in place as I said, to pass from experimentation modes to transformation modes, and also to our track that is need to be speed up. It's the solution for charging and monitoring the bus charge. So this is our main challenges, and that's need to be accelerated with the funds that is coming in. The target that have been set up by government by 55% of fleets converted by 2030 is still a challenge right now. Our forecast that where we are more forecasting about 2030 for having that 55. So next months and years will be crucial. So funds is really required to accelerate the beat where we are right now. For us also, the call of tender for buses is in progress. Here in Quebec, we have a consortium with all other Quebec transit agency. So this has put a lot of pressure to get that funds, not individually, but collectively. So really for us, it's putting the teams and make sure we speed track the items about the charging and monitoring solutions.
Thank you, Luc. James?
So for us, one of the things that we run into really quickly is the time it takes at a municipal level to do anything. A lot of it from flash to bang, it takes me 3 months sometimes to get a report through my city council with an approval process. And that's just because the time it takes to get the report rewritten, written, and then finally through the debates if necessary. And that's not anything that involves any engagement. Engagement takes a couple of years in some instances if we're really trying to get it done right. So when we have these newly announced federal or provincial programs that come down, and then a month, 2 months later, they're sort of asking, well, how come we haven't spent any money? Well, a lot of the time it's going to be because you just gave us the announcement. You haven't given us any of the detail. What are the things that we can actually ask for? How can we actually spend the revenue or the money that you are putting on the table? Does my provincial government agree or not agree with the direction that the federal level of granting is being done, or are they wanting to spend the money in elsewhere? And those are sort of things that we actively have to try and work through. And then once we have actually done all of the municipal wrangling, sometimes in organizations, the finance folks get in the way and make things unhelpful, or the procurement folks get in the way and make things unhelpful, but not because they're trying to make them unhelpful. It's because we're trying to make sure that we are completely, fully transparent across the board. So when we look at those sort of things, we're already building in a timeline of anywhere from, at the quickest, we're probably talking about a 6-month period from flash to bang in terms of getting something off the ground and money changing hands. So when a federal government or anybody like that puts in an 18-month timetable of this is how much time you have to spend this money, we're almost baked right from the start, just simply because if they're not understanding what our own internal processes are, we may not be able to take advantage of those things. And then when we have delays from from other levels of government because they're questioning why that's being spent that way, then we potentially may not be able to spend or take part in some of these programs. If we're looking at the zero emission bus 5,000 bus procurement program that's coming out of the federal government, it took me 3 months for us to get an account, and that was, you know, bugging them about it on a fairly frequent basis, and we still have absolutely no details. I would love to be able to understand what the level of detail that we're going to be asked to provide, and then be able to give that to them. But also, I have a staff of one that's working on this. You know, unlike some of the larger properties, I don't have an engineering property. You know, I don't have an engineering department that works on this. I have a staff of one professional engineer who's got a whole bunch of journeymen that works for him. So journey people that work for him. So we really do run into issues where if there's a lot of technicalities that need to be involved, we bring in groups like Saskatchewan Research Council, or we glean the information from our partner properties like TTC, like Edmonton Transit, and like STM. So, you know, that's kind of where we get into this. This is what takes a long time for us to get flash to bang. And there are a lot of challenges. We would love to be able to take advantage of all of these things, but there are some hard challenges that a small property like ours doesn't actually have a lot of resources to be able to put against this kind of thing.
Thanks, James. I already see some similarities between bigger STM and smaller Saskatoon, but let's see the other two. Daniel.
Yeah, I think the challenges are the same. You know, time is one. It takes time to implement this new technology, and it takes money. But depending on where you are in your transition, if you haven't started, obviously you got to start looking at what technology works best for you. Are you going long range? Are you going in depot charging? Are you going a different technology? You got to look at your facilities layout. Capacity and limitations, especially on if you're going electric on the hydro grid, your parking capacity, because it's not as simple. Diesel, you could jam the site, throw them all over the place. As long as it's fueled, it works. When you go electric, you got to be regimented. You can't have them laying around all over the place. And then how are you going to operate your network, and also then how you're going to maintain these buses. And as you're introducing the new electric buses, in our case anyways, we're displacing our diesel buses to a different site potentially. So then it's a matter of setting up those sites to accommodate the diesel buses and so on. You got to then feasibility or program cost, develop your funding model, which is critical. In our case, we're working, our funding model is part municipal, part the federal grant, and then we're looking at the CIB, which is a loan. The advantage of the CIB that they're helping us out because of the Infrastructure Canada they've announced but not opened the program. The CIBs were able to do an accelerator funding for design. So we have a chunk of money there that we're using to move forward with our design, and then hopefully tapping onto that the long lead time items, especially on the hydro side, working with our utility companies. There's a lot of long lead time items. We're talking a year and a half or longer for some of their equipment that they're saying. And then IT solutions. What we're hearing is that there's, the solution may not exist for route mapping or, the current technology or IT systems that we have for dispatch and buses may need to be upgraded. So those are long lead time items that we're looking at. So that's the update on my side.
Thank you, Dan. Bem.
So I mentioned previously that on average, we need to procure, anywhere between 170 and 200 buses per year. And that's the vast majority of those buses are just stated good repair buses. So to replace the buses at end of fleet. By 2040, when we've got zero emissions fleet, that's 2,400 buses in the fleet, right? But over the next 10 years, we have funding for a third of the $2.5 billion required to implement the state of good repair and electrification plan. And that third has come from the City of Toronto. They've got a city building fund, which enabled that. And it's putting forward kind of the city's traditional contribution to what we hope to be a 1/3, 1/3 split between the province, the city, and the federal government, of course. So it's true that it takes time for the funding to get from the federal government to the province, the municipality, and to the transit agency. And it's true, if we follow the traditional route, it could take a year just for that to happen. 6 months, James mentioned, and he mentioned it as optimistic, and I agree, that's optimistic. Somewhere between 6 months and a year. That having been said, there is precedent for having agreed on language that is to be baked into an announcement that is strong enough a commitment and targeted enough a commitment that we can act on. So with an announcement that's targeted and that is worded the right way, and it's worked out between our CFO and the city's CFO and the relevant government entity, with that public announcement, we can move forward. And so if we get that before Q1 of next year, then there's no issue, and we're going to be ready to go. And 18 months later, we're going to have buses coming in the door because we're ready to go.
Thank you, everyone. There seems to be at least for most of them, a smoothless process from announcement down to tender. That was a little bit the overarching, but there's IT as well in there. There's many different challenges. So smoothness and agility, I think, is the underlying message. The next question maybe is for Bem and James. Have you thought of, or can you share with us any strategies that you've planned as a smart strategy for charging the electric bus fleets? How do you manage the power grid needs, or how do you make it effective for your agency with all these needs?
First of all, like Luke and James have mentioned, and it seems Daniel and many others are headed, we're starting with depot charge buses, and we can go 10 years procurements with depot charge buses, with expectation, of course, that the battery density increases along the way. But we can go 10 years without having to worry about those longest runs in our current service plan that can't be accommodated by today's technology of long-range battery electric bus. So, anything in the probably beyond the 400-kilometer range. Our longest routes are about 520 to 525 kilometers, and so we do need a solution for those, and that's going to be either the depot charge bus battery density increases sufficiently, the charge rate increases sufficiently, or otherwise we're looking at en route charging, or as I saw one message in the chat there, it could be hydrogen fuel cell electric buses that satisfy that need. It could be a combination of these things. In the meantime, though, we're looking to have infrastructure required delivered to our depots 6 months in advance of the bus deliveries on the schedule I mentioned previously. To achieve that, Toronto Hydro needs to increase, so our local utility needs to increase the capacity and reliability of electricity from about the 1 megawatt we have supplying our garages today to as much as 15 megawatts. At each property, we need a substation, switchgear, energy storage, solar panels, and of course, emergency backup generation, and an energy management system to control the energy and to allow us to optimize our operations. The timing of all this work is estimated, the timing of the work, and it's estimated at about $500 million just for the infrastructure alone over the next 10 years. It's critical, obviously, and the work itself falls outside of TTC's primary experience and mandate, right? And like both Luke and James said, we had done a delivery options analysis, this very thorough analysis, looking at least 5 different delivery models, potential contract bundling strategies, from the extreme where we deliver everything and we kind of act as a prime contractor, and we go ahead and deliver everything right through. And that was a traditional model for a lot of what we have done in the not so distant past. And then right through to a model where we're getting buses as a service, the charging systems as a service, right through to maintenance of the buses, which has huge implications. But we're not going as far to that extreme. I mentioned Toronto Hydro is going to upgrade service, and then OPG is going to deal with the infrastructure on our site. They're going to own it, operate it, design, build, etc. The model, so this model at the end of the day means that the experts in electrification assets and who understand the need for the level of reliability that's required to maintain for our service, because now that electricity, it's not okay to have electricity power outage for 4 days as there was in 2003. That's even for 5 hours, it's not okay, right? Like it can have devastating consequence to our service and to an economic consequence and consequence to safety and people like essential workers getting to work and such, like people depend on the service. So we can't afford to have that. So what we're doing is we're looking to the experts in electrification technology, and that's going to be their business, and operating bus services ours.
Thanks, James.
Oh, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the period of time now to go to the 30 buses that will be depot charged. And by the time we've got those buses in place, we should have the BRT construction sorted out, and we understand what the initial results from those 30 buses are. So by the time we're starting to have to fiddle with our infrastructure within our garage, and we'll be starting some relationship building with our local utility to try and see if they want to take on the PM for that kind of thing, like Danielle and OC Transpo are doing, which is a great idea, by the way. Thank you very much for that one. But we'll have a better understanding on whether we need to buy the big batteries, with the buses with the big batteries that are going to need depot charging, or can we start buying buses with smaller batteries and take advantage of the pantograph charging on the route as we go. So that might lighten the sort of initial cost outlay. And again, as you start figuring out what the distances are involved and when you need, this one's only going to be a depot charged bus, this one could be en route charged bus, and as the en route charging systems change, we'll be able to mix and match. So just because that's the technology today doesn't mean that's going to be the technology we're going to use in even 5 years. There may well be things where we're going to build hydrogen charging stations somewhere, where it's going to be, rather than using the hydropower or the electricity powered by gas, coal, whatever we're using in our location. We might end up creating a hydrogen power system, hydrogen power cells that actually power your bus at these interim stations, as opposed to putting them on board the bus. We don't know what that's going to look like. So get ready for what changes are going to be made in the zero bus emissions industry. So, we're still playing with this, and we're not going to get tied into one particular result. And as you've seen from many of the panelists already, they're dealing with 3 or 4 different bus manufacturers, but are we even talking about the batteries and what the batteries look like and how batteries themselves are going to get charged? And then what are we going to do with the brick battery when it's 6 years into an 18-year life cycle? And there are a number of questions that I've already seen that are talking about, okay, who's doing the battery management? What's the level of that? I know one of the companies already has okay, we'll just lease you the battery, and we'll, that's going to have a very huge effect on how I look at my fleet replacement strategy, whether I'm just going to have a shell that I plug out a new battery set, or I do whatever at the 7-year life cycle, or do I go all the way to 18? And then do I have an additional use for those batteries? If I as the system own the batteries, do I start using those batteries and for the secondary use to power building backup power, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, this is an undiscovered country that we're just starting to chew the little edge to, and I think it's very exciting. But I think we better not get locked into this is the way it's going to be. I think what we need to understand is that we're now entering into an even more hyper ramped up set of change that's going to be coming to what we're going to look at in terms of project and fleet management in our future.
James, that's a great leeway into my next question. In an industry that's evolving at an incredible speed, and you alluded to part of this before, but what collaborations, or are there any collaborations and exchanges of information that you think we should be looking for, either between transit agencies, manufacturers, but being careful on the competition, antitrust issues, but and anonymizing potentially. But is there anything that specific that we are looking either to exchange between us, between industry, having a government funding idea? What would you think would benefit the industry?
Personally, I think the idea that came out where they went to one style of pantograph or overhead charging system, I think that was a great initiative. And however it came about, whether it was through a federal initiative or between the manufacturers, I think that is absolutely the way to go. Well, you guys can compete on what the buses look like. Let's not compete on how the charging systems work, because that's just a Sony beta, or beta versus VHS thing all over again, or DVD versus Blu-ray disc. We don't want to get into that. That's just noise. What we want to come out with is, we want to come out with and have this bus works. What are the peccadillos in your area that makes you choose Nova versus New Flyer, Proterra versus BYD, or some of the other things that are coming in from across the waters? So I think it's great when we can have consortia that come up with a static definition. More importantly, from my perspective, and I think from those of us that have journey people that are going to be working on these buses, what are the mechanics? What are the things that are going to have to change for mechanics? Are you going to take your frontline mechanic that yesterday was working on a diesel engine? Are you going to make him an electric vehicle technician tomorrow? Or her? With what courses are we going to do? What and you know, where's the wealth of all of this information coming from right today? It's coming from you, the manufacturers, because we aren't playing with those buses to understand what that's going to have to mean. So I think you know, we've got Nancy from the Bus Council online. There's all these federal councils that are really able to help us out in terms of what changes do we need to do to the federal standards? Do we need to change the way that people are being taught? Do we need to bring in something new? Is it a module on top of an apprenticeship training? Is it a completely different trade? I know the provincial regulators are going to have something to say about that, but we can actually drive the bus in this instance. We can start recommending things based on what you, the manufacturers, with this wealth of what that danger sort of looks like for those people that are dealing with these propulsion systems. What do they actually need to know? I mean, we're not looking at training heavy duty bus mechanics to be an EV technician that's going to be working on a subway train. We're talking about somebody that's still going to be dealing with tire systems, still dealing with transmissions, still dealing with brakes tomorrow. But right now they're talking about how do they troubleshoot the power pack issue that's happening, and what are the no touch areas. And I don't think that's a complete overhaul of how you do your apprenticeship or your mechanical training. I think that's a module so that you can sign into, maybe I'm signing into the propulsion system shop this sign up, as opposed to brakes or transmissions or bodies or whatever, however you've got it broken down at your property.
James, before we go on to Luc, that standard that you mentioned of the charging standard was a federally funded project led by the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, QTRIC, where we were involved. There was another OEM involved as well, charging manufacturers and transit agencies. We all got together, and it was led by a nonprofit. So we were able to exchange information without going directly with each other, just for the benefit of our audience. That was a great result, where we now have one standard, and that was led by a federally funded project. So, Luc, you want to chime in on this one?
Yes. First of all, at this point, I don't think they have some best practice that is already in place. But what I can share is, it's clear that it's not because I have the IT background, but the information technology will be a masterpiece in that transition. Electric buses for us enable a new model and turn to data-driven operation and maintenance, which is not the case before. We implement systems like telemetry, yard management. We don't have those technology before. And the number of data that we're going to gather with that will be important. And the smart system of the electric ecosystems will be key with the integration of different parts. They have obviously the data we're going to gather from the buses, the yard management, the route schedules. So all those things will need to be integrated, and that's what made the smart thing of that. And the electric transformation bring logistic challenges. And I strongly believe that it's going to be over next years. It's going to be a great playground for AI and data intelligence. I think this market will need to be developed. And it's where I think we need to start a new way and embrace a model where we're going to have collaboration with partners. We're going to have those data. You talk about data anonymizations. What is clear for us we don't have all the details right now, but in our architecture that we are in design right now, we have a specific track on the data gathering and data organizations. And we are details this part right now, but it's clear it's going to be a key things to improve the products over years. So I think for us, it's a masterpiece to have this. How it's going to evolve over years, future will say, but it's already a track that we identified in our architectures to make sure we are able to get intelligence from that data, but also the way we can exchange this data with our partners, maybe other manufacturers.
Thank you, Luc. We have about 5 minutes left before we get into the Q&A with the audience, and there are a number of questions. So I think I'll limit it to 1 or 2 of mine left, and then we'll go straight into the audience. The next one that I was interested in is, we know the limitations of battery electric buses and the batteries, the range. They don't compare to a diesel bus, for example. They don't compare to a hybrid bus. But maybe Ben, can you tell us, have you implemented any training strategies for the drivers on how to optimize that battery life?
The simple answer is yes, but I'd like to backtrack a little bit and just focus on what we can do from an engineering controls perspective first, in order to kind of, as much as possible, limit the parameters that are left open for the operator. And so for us, it started with looking at the drive chain efficiency and the impact of acceleration curves and jerk rates, which is the instantaneous acceleration that that passengers feel as the bus is accelerating, and limiting those or optimizing those to both allow for the acceleration that's needed for operating the bus, but at the same time reducing the energy consumption over those just few first several seconds of acceleration, or even split seconds of acceleration. And then also maximizing the regenerative braking that you get. So, because different OEMs have different regenerative braking profiles, and they have different acceleration profiles. So what we've done is we've tested all of them, and we've looked at our hybrid bus again, the Nova hybrid, as well as the Proterra, the BYD, and the New Flyer, and we've come to understand what is the optimum acceleration curve, what are the optimum jerk rates, what's the optimum regenerative braking effort. And now we've standardized that across the entire fleet. And so regardless, the other benefit of this, obviously not just for extending range, is that the operator has the same feel of operating a bus regardless of who makes it. And then now what's left is, yes, for the operator to have a view of the energy consumption rate. And unlike a diesel bus, we don't have fuel gauges on diesel buses, because someone a long time ago was concerned, and perhaps there were legitimacy behind this concern, but that as the fuel gauge started reaching close to empty, operators would say, oh, my bus is close to empty, I'm not going to make it, and they asked for a change off. So we had no fuel gauges on electric buses. We chose to leave the state of charge gauge there and visible to them. And we're going to look at also something more real-time efficiency gauges that allow the operator to kind of optimize their driving behavior. But at the same time, we don't want them to be overly concerned with that. We can engineer the efficiency as much as possible, and then and we're not so dependent on the operator's behavior.
Thank you, Bem. All right, last question from me. There are a few questions on the Q&A and the discussion similarly around it. We know that the electric bus experience is in a positive way very different. But we also know that technicians must maintain the bus and drivers have to drive it differently. How have you addressed the workforce needs for this transition? And let's go to James and Luc.
Luc, go ahead.
Go ahead first. Thank you, James. First, just to share with you guys some statistic. Based on our city mobility project survey, our customer have perceived 70% of improvement in their experience with this with the electric buses, and the main factor of that was noise and light more, and with the light duty more window space. But for bus driver, our workforce driver have perceived at 72% an improvement on their driving experience, and their factors was noise again, like customer, and smoothness of driving, acceleration, and driving console. So for us, that's a good step, because with the experience we made, we have seen that our driver workforce is willing to this new technology. Especially for the global plan and the transition, we are just at the beginning for that, to be honest. We identified that track, but it's not well detailed yet. But as I said, the good news is that they're willing to. For the technicians, the mechanical technician, it will be a major transition for them. But what we are seeing right now already with the new technician we're hiring, they are very interested in technologies, in electric technology instead the diesel mechanism. So, but what we are clear here, we already identified that training will be a masterpiece that we'll need to invest in. But again, it's what we're seeing right now. It's a lot of willingness from customer, drivers, and also the technicians.
Again, you know, we've got a lot of programs that we train our operators on, and I love Bem's idea about getting to a standardization. Since most of the back end is going to be a software related, that's going to be wonderful if we can get those built into a standard, or this is what you should be looking at. And I'd love to be able to sort of receive that information from the TTC if they're willing to provide it to people. But again, where we go with it, the training of our operators, it's all going to be about it's all built on DDC and you know, anybody that's used the CUDA EnviroSafe driver or safe driver system, or I know ETS still uses their system, but it's all based on a defensive driving course where you start changing the behavior of your operators so that they understand it's all about how you get the passenger from stop to stop. It's not about jackrabbiting to a stoplight or to a bus stop, or it's all about managing that headway, and it's all about managing the trip. And as we start changing the focus that we put on our operators from you're just driving a thing with a whole bunch of folks in the back, it could be a tandem rig truck for all some operators in the systems deal with it, because they're thinking I'm only driving cargo. No, we have to transition from the cargo idea to no, you're providing a customer related service. So you need to understand how the people behind you are going to react. And one of the simple things that our training supervisor uses when he's doing his training is he's got a water bottle and it sits on the wheel well just behind the operator. And if it tips over, you did something wrong. What'd you do? And they walk through that whole process. So it's more of the same. It's taking all of these lessons learned. It's taking that defensive driving approach to how you provide the service to your customer. That's where we need to start positioning our operators. And if we position our operators there, they're going to do better because they're going to have a better relationship with the customer because they're doing a good job, as opposed to, you know, those people that are only looking at it as a way of getting from point A to point B, and I want to get there as quickly as possible so I can go out and have a smoke or whatever. We're always going to have those people. Those are going to be the people that our HR side of it ends up dealing with. But if by and large, we have trained our folks how to understand to take the benefits of the the systems that are coming with these electric buses, then we'll build that into our customer support, and we'll build that into the way we relate to our customers. And it should be a win-win if we can do this right.
Thank you. Very informative. We will run out of time with the questions, but as Namra mentioned earlier, we'll take them offline, and as a panel, if we can answer them, that'd be great. Or once we finish this panel, if we can, individually answer them, that also would work. So I will go with the first question from the audience. I'm sorry. Luc, that one's specifically for you, and it asks whether you mentioned that the STM decided that in-depot charging is the best solution, not en route. Can you give more details on why and whether you use pantograph or plug-in at the depot?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In fact, I have two questions here. First, we have decided for the depot charging because it's more easy to install the infrastructure on the road. Because what we have understand, installing the charging infrastructure is very consuming, with all having the access to the land, access to how we put the underground infrastructure. So this is the first part. The second one is the flexibility on the network. When you have that space, you need to manage. It needs to be on your routes on your network. So we lost a little bit of flexibility here. For the second part, what we are using in the depot, we have tested the plug-in, we have tested the pantograph. We also get a look, especially in Europe, they're more advanced in terms of the Wi-Fi charging. But for us, it's going to be the pantograph, which is more the main challenge, the main track we're looking into. And even in the pantograph, they have some different strategy. They have some buses have the pantograph on the top of the buses, and some of them it's attached to the facilities. Even with our winters, having some stuff and mechanical stuff on the bus is not the best way to do it. So having a pantograph installed in the garages for charging buses, it's the track we are looking into now.
Thanks, Luc. Another question was related specifically to batteries, whether it's the ownership, their lifetime, or end-of-life management. I know that in Quebec, there is a legislation on the table that addresses end of life, what happens to the buses after they are done for transit use. They are still very good for other uses. And the government has put a bill on the table to address it. But maybe in other provinces or from a transit agency perspective, anybody want to take, has that been looked at in terms of ownership of batteries? I think somebody mentioned leases before. Ben?
On the subject of ownership, yeah, we've also, I think everyone probably has been offered I guess the opportunity to have a bus OEM or someone else even to own the battery, and we would lease that battery. For us, it comes down to a cost of capital question, and if you have options. If you have grant funding, obviously from the government, there's no beating that because you don't have to pay it back, obviously. Even if you have government financing like what CIB is offering, then private industry can't beat those rates or those offers. So to me, it's a cost of capital question. It's a pretty straightforward financial point. On the question of sorry, the second part of that question was about the battery. Was it sorry?
So ownership, lifetime, and end of life management.
End of life use, yeah. So we're definitely looking for. In fact, I want to look up this bill that you referred to because I wasn't aware that it was being tabled. But we're definitely looking to. In fact, the plan was to engage the market to ask in a open call for essentially a partnership that would take our batteries and ensure the best, highest use for it as a second life in a stationary application, likely, rather than going straight to disposal. So in that contract, we would likely sell our batteries to someone who would then repackage them, sell them for a stationary application, and then we would ensure through that contract that at the end of that life,
it would be disposed properly.
Thank you, Ben. If Namra showed up, that means we're out of time. So I want to thank you all. There are a lot of other questions in the Q&A. Unfortunately, the topic being as hot as it is, we were not able to address them all. We still have a lot to say, but we'll try to answer them on the side. And Namra, somebody asked if we can share the coordinates of our panelists, if they're willing to share it. So perhaps there could be informal discussions as well on that. So thank you, everyone.